Good afternoon, Coolest Coast. Welcome to this episode of Coffee on the Coast. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host today, Tina Prigge. Delighted to welcome our guest, Jeff Steuer. He is Scientist Emeritus with the U.S. Geological Survey, Water Resources Discipline. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Tina.
So that is
How are you?
a big title. Can you tell us what does that mean? What do you do? And more importantly, how does that overlap with the topic that we're talking about today?
Sure. So I'm retired. I was a water engineer for the U.S. Geological Survey, doing surface water things like I did the PCB model for the Fox River and surface water stuff. And so I'm retired now, but probably 20 years ago, you give some presentations with your work at conferences, and I heard a researcher from the University of Wisconsin talk about carbon going to the atmosphere and what we were doing to the climate. And it caught my interest, but back then we were raising kids. I had a job, and I didn't have time to think about it much or get involved. But I've retired, and about 3 years ago, I took it's called climate reality training, and they've trained about 50,000 people around the globe in over 150 countries. So I was one of those about 3 years ago, and they asked that you just pay the information forward that you learned during the course. So I've given presentations in the last 3 years, probably about 30 of them, and um, yeah, I do it because I think it's really important for my grandfather, right? Really important for my children and my grandkids, but also I try and learn from the audiences. I try and put out some things that maybe the audience hasn't thought about, but then I also try and uh, get them to mention something that I haven't thought of. So anyway, that's how I got started doing these things.
So you're hearing your audience, it's kind of an exchange of ideas. The more ideas we share, right, the more we can expand our minds. So let's tell people you are going to be in Manitowoc at the Manitowoc Public Library for a presentation,
Oh,
Climate Reality with Jeff Steuer. That is going to be Monday, January 20th at 6 p.m. And you are invited and welcome to join that discussion Monday, January 20th, 6 p.m. So, what is the current climate reality? Can you tell us about that and what we should be
sure,
paying attention to?
sure. So I'll go over some of the science, and I'll look at kind of what I go back to about 11,000 years last ice age, and I show the carbon in our atmosphere is going up and down, and I show that we need that to make Earth habitable. And however, since about World War II, we've really put a lot of excess carbon in the atmosphere, and I'll show that a little bit. I'll show that you can take a little experiment at home where you can show that carbon is like an insulator. So I will go over some of that, the past, and then I'll talk about kind of what our situation is right now. I think a lot of us, we hear about um, the heavy downpours, we hear about increased hurricane intensity, the droughts. I'll talk about some of that, uh, but then also I'll go into the solutions also, what we can do to turn things around, so yeah, and yeah.
I do know like the terms climate change, for example, right, can be a really hot button topic. But I think
Mhm.
by discussing the climate reality, we're acknowledging that there are real and increasingly harsh weather events that are happening. Even the fires in California that are, in progress today, for example. And so, talking about those solutions, yeah, that is super important. So, can you tell us a little more about what you plan to talk about? And
Sure,
in your sessions, is it interactive? Is there Q&A? Is that how you get feedback?
sure. Well, actually, before I answer that question, you mentioned the fires in California, right? And I have a son who lives out. The fires are a couple miles from his house right now.
Oh,
So
God.
he's worked. So anyway, um, so yeah, one of the reasons and I'll talk about this that we see more fires are because every degree centigrade, about 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit that it rises, we increase the amount of lightning strikes. And so fires are much more common to happen as we raise the temperatures. So yeah, I will talk about the effects of having this by having this extra carbon, this extra insulation in the atmosphere. I'll talk about how that is changing the water cycle on Earth, and how it increases the intense precipitation in certain areas, droughts in other areas. Um, I won't talk. I'll talk a little bit about the diseases that come from increased climate, and I draw upon some of my experiences. I've traveled overseas and I've seen the effect of uh, not having the glaciers where we used to have, and mountain villages that depend on uh, the summer snow melt to irrigate the crops. And that pack is just about gone, not coming back. So they don't have a way to irrigate their crops. I'll talk, I showed some pictures from around the globe, but I also show how it hits home right here. I've had some experience in measuring floodwaters in the Red River, and um, I have some pictures in the presentation of about a block away from my house that showed what last summer, because we had the fires in Canada, what the smoke was like 1 block from my house. Where you could normally look across the lake and see the Capitol and all, and now you couldn't see across the lake at all. So I'll tie in some of the things that I've touched and felt. So.
I just read an article yesterday, as a matter of fact, that they anticipate there's going to be 2 weeks less of winter in this area of Wisconsin. So I imagine that's a consequence too.
It is. When you asked me how my career got me into this or something, yeah, that climate modeler, that researcher 20 years ago, I remember him saying that if we don't do something about the amount of fossil fuels we're burning and all that our climate in Wisconsin is going to be like in Arkansas. And I don't remember the time frame, but that we'd have Arkansas climate. And so the training, I will pass along what I learned during the training. There were a number of things in the training that just surprised me. I mean, I really didn't. I have some science background, so I have some ability to understand the science, but the talk is going to be like a lay conversation, because I really when I get done presenting, I open it up to the audience, and I really hope that people will point out things maybe that I haven't thought about, because during the presentation I'm looking to bring out points that maybe they haven't thought about. But I'm also looking for the audience to raise, what, Jeff, have you thought about this, or you're not thinking about that? So but I actually, I mentioned about some things that the training really brought out, and I'm not going to go through those now, but like one of them is, I hadn't thought about like the big picture thing. I mean, when you look at us on Earth, the agricultural revolution took about 800 years, where we were hunter-gatherers and we started growing crops, right? That was 800 or 900 years. And the agricultural revolution took about 100 years, or the industrial took about 100 years. And, the digital computer, cell phones, that's happened during my lifetime. That's been pretty darn quick. And it's really felt that, the renewable energy economy can happen really fast, because it's built upon those other things. So I hadn't really thought about that we have the ability to make it happen really quickly, if we want to. So I hadn't thought about the big picture type of thing, but yeah.
Yeah, so what you're saying is maybe it's not too late. Maybe we can course correct.
That's really the good news. I'll point out, and I'll show some of the data why we can't afford to dilly-dally. But the good news is, right now we've got the technology. We don't have to develop anything new. We've got the technology, and I'll go through this in the talk, to turn things around and have like literally 50% of the carbon emissions in 5 years. We can really reduce it. When I say carbon, fossil fuels, it's coal, it's the oil, which is gasoline or diesel, and then it's natural gas. It basically taking carbon that's been underground for millions of years and releasing it up into the atmosphere. And that protective blanket we've had that we need it there to make Earth habitable. We've just increased it way too much. So, but we've got the ability to turn it around. We just really have to want to do it. Yeah.
So I just want to remind viewers, this insightful conversation presentation is going to take place Monday, January 20th, 6 p.m. at the Manitowoc Public Library. In some of your talking points, Jeff, you mentioned finding a common ground. What does that look like? What does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is about a year ago, I saw ex-Speaker of the House, Republican Paul Ryan, speak at a policy forum, and he came out, and if someone wants to look it up, it's on YouTube. But he came out and what words? I think. Let me see. It was something like, let me say for the record, good to get carbon out of the atmosphere. And now, of course, he didn't necessarily agree. The way to do it was with the Inflation Reduction Act. He explained some other ways to do it. But you've got folks. You've got folks that are coming together that, hey, we've done something to the atmosphere, and it really is a thin layer of atmosphere and we need to do something about it. We can't keep using it like a sewer. So I think around the political spectrum in this country, we're starting to come together. How we will actually fix it may vary. So, Uruguay is a country that had political differences. They have come together partially. They're almost net zero carbon emitters. Uruguay is and Norway has just about gotten rid of their of gas vehicles, so they've really reduced their carbon emissions. So this is not something that just U.S. is going to do. It's a global thing, but we can learn how other countries have done it. So there certainly is common ground now. Hopefully that common ground will get stronger. But the actual, there's certainly going to be political different approaches to doing it. During the kind of at the end of my presentation, before we have the open discussion, I asked the audience to kind of do 3 different things, and those are 3 things that you can do, whether you're Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, whatever. It's just so yeah.
Okay. So, speaking of the people that are planning to attend, is there anything you would recommend that they reflect on before attending?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if people will want to do this, but if they could just talk to their neighbors, their friends, their family, and see what's on their mind. As you mentioned earlier, unfortunately, even the science of the climate reality has become politicized some, and it's not easy to always talk about this. And I wouldn't ask them to try and convert their neighbors one way or the other, or their friends, but just find out what their friends, neighbors, and families are thinking before they come, if they can, because I would really like to know. I'd like them to pass that on during our discussion period.
What do you find are some of the pros and cons that people have when it comes to this topic?
Yeah. I've done this. My motivation for doing this, I read the research papers and I try and stay up to speed on things, and so it takes some time. My motivation, I think I said earlier, is I think it's really important for the next generation. We can't leave them with the path we're going on, and I try and learn from the audience. Um, so actually, can you repeat the question? I forgot what you asked me.
I was
Help
just
me out.
wondering, what some of the pros and cons are that you bump
Oh,
up
yeah, yeah,
against. Like if
yeah,
somebody,
yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
want to hear about the topic, what?
I haven't, and that was one of the reasons I'm doing this. Is I'm really trying to expand in my view, and I haven't heard at the discussions a whole lot of cons. Maybe people just aren't comfortable. I will have a handout with, I think, some of the important kind of science slides, along with my email, and I asked people to email me afterwards. I mean, I had one one person asked me. One person asked me, you're telling me to vote a certain way, you're telling me to vote Democrat. And I said, no, I'm not asking you to vote anyway. But as far as if you go to a primary election and you've got three candidates and one of them's talking about what we're putting in the atmosphere, give it some thought. No, I'm not asking. So, but I haven't gotten a lot of pros. But, I will give an example, Tina, of how this is not an easy topic for some. I mean, 2 years ago, I think I gave this presentation or something like this at the Two Rivers Library, and I'd mentioned it to a friend, longtime friend, that I was going to do this presentation. And, we have different views on things. And the friend said, Jeffrey, we've been friends a long time, but if I come to that presentation, it's not going to do anything for our friendship. So that's how and so I just ask people to have an open mind, and but I realize it's not an easy conversation for everybody to have, but it's an important one because um, you know I mentioned the good news is we have what we need to fix it, um, but we can choose to correct the climate. But but there's going to be resistance. I mean, most of us don't like change, right? We don't like change, and there is organized resistance. I mean, oil and gas interests. Um, not going to go into detail, but I've read there's some parallel aspects to what the tobacco companies did, and what has there's some parallels, but anyway, there's going to be resistance, and like I say, none of us really like change, but it really is an opportunity. I think the more I look at this and all, it's really an opportunity, not a sacrifice. I mean, I think we can have, in a number of ways, we can have a better world in many ways than we've had since World War II. We can have, I mean, I go into some of the particular things about coal generated power. And I had a colleague who researched, I talked about that a little bit, but in a lot of ways, we can have a better planet, and we can have a better economy than we've had since, and in the energy sector, the jobs will be safer. I talk a little bit about coal mine accidents, and I have a son who was in the Coast Guard during the Deepwater Horizon um, accident, and the difficulty, and I talk about that a little bit, the difficulty in cleaning it up. And I don't know how many deaths were on that platform, but the renewable clean energy economy will be better both for the workers, and it's going to be better for the planet. And some countries are really, like I said, Uruguay has really moved along. So anyway, yeah.
What do scientists foresee or predict if action isn't taken? If we just,
Yeah, right.
stumble along as we
Yeah,
are,
right. Yeah, exactly.
how quickly does it all wind down?
Right. Oh, that's a great question, and that's part of the good news. It was up until about 2, 3 years ago. It was felt that if we just leveled off, I mean, the concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere now, I think off the top of my head, I think is 420, right? And historically, it bounced around for 10, 11,000 years down at about 250 or something like that. But anyway, it was felt that if we leveled off our carbon right now, that we would keep having increasing problems for 25 to 30 years. That has totally changed. The science in the last 3 years has shown that if we can level off what we're doing um, to the atmosphere with carbon, that we can turn it around in 2 to 3 years. But if we don't, and I don't have time to go into this, I mean, but the scientists have got it down, the chemistry and physics of it all. They've got it down really well now. It's not perfect, but it's to where they can not just predict like how the temperature is going to change, but and I use one of these examples actually in my talk if there's time. They can predict that if we keep going the way we are, what areas of the world will have larger precipitation storms, which one will be drier, which portion will um, have different climate changes, and they can do it with a spatial accuracy. So in other words, they can't tell you how. I grew up in Branch, right? They can't tell you how Branch is going to be exactly, but they can tell you about what northern Africa is going to be, if it's going to be drier there, or in the Midwest of the U.S. Are our rainstorms going to be 30% more intense? So and their predictions, I mean, they've made these predictions 5 years back, and they're starting to come true. So, to answer your question, um, the goal has been to try and keep us under 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, what is that? It's maybe about 2.7 Fahrenheit or something. We're starting to approach that, but at 2 degrees, it's things. I'm trying to think how much of it. Of the coastline of the U.S., there's a large number of homes that will be flooded. So you have oceans rising, So I don't. I talk about some of that but I only have 40 minutes, and I really do want to spend time on how we can correct it. And but yes, we really can't hand on this atmosphere and the increasing amount of carbon in the atmosphere to my grandchildren. We can't.
Right.
It's just not right.
Well, Jeff, I think what you have planned for the community is a very informative, knowledge-based, interesting presentation. I just want to remind viewers that that's going to happen. It's Climate Reality with Jeff Steuer, Monday, January 20th, 6 o'clock p.m. at the Manitowoc Public Library, Balkansky Room. I super appreciate your time today, Jeff. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Well, Tina, I appreciate the great questions. It was fun.
No problem. Is there anything you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, please come, and please bring your thoughts about what I should be thinking about, and I will pass along a number of things that you can do personally quite easily. And if you want to get more involved, I'll have some resources and some solutions you can get more deeply involved. I'll give you some options. So, yeah.
Thanks to everyone so much for joining us today. My guest, Jeff Steuer, Scientist Emeritus, U.S. Geological Survey, Water Resources Discipline. It's been a true pleasure, Jeff.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.